What are the differences between avoidant attachers and narcissists? The behaviors, they can overlap quite a bit, and it can be very confusing to understand what you're dealing with. But there are some distinct differences, and the biggest difference of all is the intent. The avoidant goes into the relationship with genuine intent at the start. They want love, they want connection. Narcissists, on the other hand, that intention is not always so pure. So let's get into the differences, starting with avoidance. Avoidant attachment is simply an insecure attachment style. It's a learned behavior going back to childhood. This is a person that experienced consistent childhood emotional neglect. And in the case of a fearful avoidant, they experience that neglect combined with abuse, chaos, sometimes even trauma. And they developed insecurities and fears because of this. The biggest fear of all is the fear of abandonment, but that usually lies in their subconscious. And they associate emotional closeness with rejection and abandonment. They learn that if you rely on anybody for your emotional needs, this person's likely to reject you and abandon you. And that's why they feel so unsafe getting close to somebody. Because when things get close, their subconscious mind tells them that they're going to get hurt and they're going to get abandoned. But they have deep insecurities deep down, and they personalize that neglect, growing up to feel unlovable, defective. So, due to those insecurities, they rely heavily on external validation to feel better about themselves, needing to get that attention from others to be wanted by others. And that can drive them to do a lot of their selfish behaviors. Avoidants also lack the capacity and the willingness in many cases to consider the needs and feelings of another person. But their intention is not to hurt the other person. They are just so insecure that they become hyper focused on soothing themselves and meeting their own needs to feel better about themselves. Avoidants also lack the capacity to really manage and cope with anxiety and stress in a healthy way. Their brain tends to shut down and they tend to get overwhelmed whenever they get triggered, which can cause them to go quite cold. They can go silent because they can't even articulate the words. They associate closeness with rejection and abandonment, but they also associate communicating their feelings with rejection and abandonment. And that's because they usually grew up in environments where their feelings were dismissed, rejected, sometimes even reprimanded for having feelings. Growing up in households where you don't talk about feelings. And if you're sad, go suck it up and be sad in your room. Nobody wants to see it here. So they grew up to fear communication, to fear closeness, but they still want the closeness and the connection. So it creates a conundrum. They want the relationships, but then the relationship triggers them and they self-sabotage it. But their goal is never to hurt the other person. But they don't exactly go out of their way to not hurt the other person. They just become focused on meeting their needs and whatever soothes them in the moment. But they can heal. It's just a learned behavior. Through therapy, especially with a licensed psychotherapist and a commitment to a change in behavior, they can absolutely learn to become secure, healthier, better partners. Narcissists, on the other hand, that's an entirely different animal. Let's get into it. Narcissism, it's a personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. And this is a person that does not go into the relationship seeking love and connection. What they're seeking is narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply is the attention, validation, adoration, and power and control that a narcissist feels entitled to. The narcissist always needs to be in the power position in the relationship, and they feel good being in control, being able to affect the other person. Narcissists also experience neglect and sometimes trauma in childhood, but rather than just developing into an insecure attachment style, it developed into a full-blown personality disorder. The world the narcissist lives in is not the same world that everybody else lives in. They live in an altered reality, a delusion. The narcissist has a deep core pit of shame inside of them, but they don't want to face that shame. So what they do is they create something called a false self. The false self is the image of themselves that they project to the world. The false self, they also convince themselves is who they really are. The false self is always a perfect person, makes no mistakes. This is why a narcissist can never take accountability for anything that they do. If they do something bad or if they hurt somebody, it's somebody else's fault. For example, if they cheated, It's your fault because you didn't give them what they needed. If they were to take accountability, it would shatter the false self and it would completely have it come crashing down on them and they'd have to face their inner shame. So that false self must stay intact at all times. Early in the relationship, the narcissist, they put their partner up on a pedestal because they've convinced themselves that they are a perfect person. So therefore, their partner must be a perfect person as well. And they shower you with adoration and praise. But in reality, they're praising themselves because they're perfect. Therefore, they have a perfect partner, and their perfect partner is a representation of them. So whenever they're love bombing their partner, they're actually, in a weird way, love bombing themselves because they're telling themselves how awesome they are for having an awesome, perfect person. But over time, this person shows their flaws because everybody has flaws and the narcissist can't have that. So they begin to devalue this person. First, it starts with little put downs, passive aggressive comments, gaslighting, and it can get worse and worse and worse until it gets to the point where the partner of the narcissist feels like they can't do anything right. Nothing is ever good enough for the narcissist. Then, by that point, the narcissist has found a new source of supply elsewhere. They're getting attention elsewhere, and they completely discard the person, and they don't care about him anymore. It's like a used toy that broke. That's it. There's no use for him anymore. When an avoidant discards someone, it's out of fear. It's a vastly different intent than a narcissist. The avoidant is afraid that hurt and rejection and abandonment is inevitable, so better to protect themselves and run away now. The behaviors can be so incredibly similar, but the intent is so vastly different. A narcissist is much more likely to say and do very cold and cruel and cutting things, whereas an avoidant is much more likely to be self-deprecating while they're pushing you away. A narcissist is much more likely to do things like triangulation, which is to use a third party as a way to manipulate their partner. A narcissist, after a divorce, is also much more likely to try to turn the kids against their ex-partner, whereas an avoidant is far less likely to do that. A narcissist actually enjoys hurting you. That's because if they're able to hurt you and see you in pain, it means that they have effect over you, that they are relevant, that they can have control, and it gives them supply. They feel good. They actually enjoy inflicting pain on others because it means they're powerful. An avoidant does not enjoy inflicting pain on others. They can inflict pain, but it's not their intent. It's not their goal. It's maladaptive self-preservation. When it comes to the avoidant, it's always about self-preservation. It's a defense mechanism. Their defense mechanisms can hurt other people, but their goal isn't to hurt other people. The behaviors, again, can be so similar. Things like cheating, ghosting, gaslighting. But with the narcissist, the intention is always more malicious, and it is more cruel and generally more cold. But either way, if you're being mistreated, does it really matter if you're with a narcissist or an avoidant? Because you're still being mistreated. Regardless of the intent, if you're being hurt, you're being hurt. That's why holding boundaries is so incredibly important. Your boundaries are your limits of what you want, don't want, what you need, don't need, what you'll tolerate and not tolerate. Also, your expectations can be a form of a boundary. People that are incredibly selfish, people that are unhealthy, generally cannot maintain relationships with people that have and hold and enforce boundaries. Boundaries do not work for the partner that's only thinking of themselves. So yes, if you hold boundaries, you might lose the relationship with an unhealthy person, such as an avoidant or narcissist, but you'll be protecting your heart and sending yourself a powerful message that you are not going to let yourself endure any mistreatment or abuse, and that you have your own back. And that is a very uplifting thing to say to yourself. So take care of yourself, respect yourself, hold boundaries even when it's hard. No, it's not a recreational activity to hold boundaries, but it will protect you from getting sucked into a long-term unhealthy relationship. And your boundaries are how you get to the healthy partner, because the unhealthy partners will be weeded out and you'll be available for when a person that genuinely loves you and cares about you comes into your life.